not being willing to provide the money through the exchange programs, and no advertising. So they say, we can't operate under that, so we're going to have to leave. So, Mr. Speaker, it is in fact your bill that is causing the problem in Iowa. So, pays to know something about insurance. Yes. Too much coffee.
Never too much coffee.
I'm upset. I'm upset because I know we can do better. I'm upset because I know that we have serious problems in this country. And I know that this is the greatest country in the world, that we are really good people in America. We have different political views, to be sure. Some people think we ought to do it this way, some people think we ought to do it that way. That's okay. And maybe somewhere in the middle is the way it'll happen. But we need to get past all of this. And we need to focus on the things that will build a good future, not only for those of us that are going to be around for another several dozen years, I hope, but for those who are coming after us, our grandchildren, our children and grandchildren, and making sure that their future is secure. And that's my job, and it's also your job. So let's go round and round on questions. A couple of things that are up here. Some of this I've already talked about. I do want to talk about a piece of legislation that we put in called the Fair COLA for our seniors, and that happens to do with the cost of living for Social Security, which needs to be adjusted. So let's take questions. Raise your hand. I don't know if this microphone's around. If so, you get the first question. Yes, ma'am. Stand up and be as loud as you possibly can. Use your grandmother voice.
My name is Christine Long. I'm a retired teacher and a Vietnam veteran. I would like to get your I'd like to get your opinion on California's recent passage in the Senate of SB 562, which is state health care.
562. Which one is it again?
Health care for California.
Oh, this is the universal health care
Yes.
bill? Well, thank you. That's a good question back in the back of the room. What was the question? The question has to do with a piece of legislation that passed the California State Senate, 562, which is an attempt by California to establish a universal single-payer system in the state of California. It can be done. The first time this was attempted was 1992 and 3. I was the insurance commissioner. I wrote a single-payer universal health care bill that we called managed competition. And it would have been a universal system. We put it, Senator Art Torres carried the legislation. It wound up on Governor Wilson's desk, was vetoed, and then we've seen attempts over the intervening years to try to do it. It can be done. However, in order for it to be successful, we have to have the federal government involved in the program. Because the federal government, through a variety of health care programs, provides more than 50% of the total health care in California and really across the nation. Medicare, Medicaid, Medi-Cal, VA, which would probably not be included, but Children's Health Insurance Program and a couple of other smaller ones. So you've got to have that federal government money involved. Given this administration, I don't think that's going to happen, but it is possible. It is a very, very important attempt because it focuses our attention on the possible. So it's a good one. Next question. In the back of the room, yes, sir.
Congressman, I want to thank you for being a strong proponent of fighting Alzheimer's disease and getting Congress to approve funding for research. What is the danger if this bill is passed that Alzheimer's disease would be considered a pre-existing condition?
Well, a couple of things. I really hadn't thought about that. For the most part, I'm about to say this incorrectly. Alzheimer's and dementia is usually in people that are on Medicare or approaching Medicare, in other words, 65. So there is no pre-existing condition for Medicare programs. There are limitations, however, in the Medicare program for long-term care and also for in-home supportive services. And so for the vast majority of people suffering from that illness, they would probably be on Medicare. Now, early onset is another issue, and absolutely in that case, it would be considered a pre-existing condition. There's no doubt about it. And there are many other kinds of mental brain issues that affect people around of every age. The question of the benefit package under the current law includes mental health services and brain issues of all kinds. Now, if the states are to write their own benefit package, as would be provided in the legislation that passed the House of Representatives, which we now call Trump Care, I'm just trying to think of how you get Ryan into that. Somebody sit down and pencil this one out. Rip, something like that. Come on, somebody figure it out.
Rump care.
We'll leave it with Trump right now. But the as they rewrite those, as the states are allowed to rewrite the benefit packages, we're almost certain that mental health would drop out, as it was in the past, and other kinds of pre-existing illnesses. A good case. I do want to speak about Alzheimer's for a few more moments. I often speak on this issue on the floor of the House, and we have been very successful in the United States researching critical medical issues, health, heart issues, HIV/AIDS, cancer issues, various types of cancer. If you look at the amount of money that we have spent, which is about $6 billion a year on cancer, about $5 billion a year on various heart and related issues, we have been very, very successful in reducing the incidence of those illnesses. HIV/AIDS is probably the single biggest example of successful intervention through medical science and application of the science in the community. Alzheimer's was funded at about $500 million, about 1/10 of what we spent on heart issues, heart diseases. The result was very little progress in addressing this issue of dementia Alzheimer's. We were successful in doubling to just under $1 billion the funding for Alzheimer's 2 years ago. We wanted to increase it by another $500 million to $1.5 billion. It's very, very clear that research is on the cusp of successfully understanding this illness, and some of the treatments seem to have potential. I'll give you one example. A treatment that was suggested about a decade ago. They did the trials and didn't seem to work. And so they put that treatment aside. And then some statistician went back, looked at the statistical analysis that was done and said, wait a minute, there's something here that we need to look at. And it turned out that for people that had early onset that received the treatment, there was a significant delay in the effect of Alzheimer's. And I go, whoa, maybe this particular treatment can delay the onset if you have early intervention. So that's now being studied. So this is the research issue. Here's the problem. President Trump, in his proposed budget for next year, which is known as the skinny budget, because in fact it really decimated most programs, reduced the funding for the National Institute of Health by $6 billion and transferred that money to his wall. And I'm going, no, that is really not very smart. to take money away from research that has a direct effect on the health of every single American, and to build a wall that, draw your own conclusions about the wall, that is at best stupid, is not a good policy. So we're going to come back. We'll hopefully be able to maintain the current funding. It's going to be a big fight for the rest of this year up until September 30th, the end of the fiscal year, where we must once again fund government. In the funding last week for the remainder of this year, the next 5.5 months, we were able to maintain the funding. We pushed aside those who wanted to cut the funding and said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to fund the research at the same level. Thank you for your question. Okay, over here, you're standing up. Yes.
Hi there, my name is Lori Hartman.
Really loud, Lori.
Okay, my name is Lori Hartman and I'm the Executive Director for Meals on Wheels here in Solano County. So since you brought up the skinny budget, what do you see on the horizon in terms of potential cuts to Meals on Wheels programs here at the state level and the county level?
The skinny budget proposal is not going to happen. There are some parts of it that will certainly move forward. The issue of Meals on Wheels, which was specifically identified for cut, was, again, what are you thinking? You know, hello, is anybody home? Mr. Mulvaney, the new director of the Office of Management and Budget, he is a radical. I mean, there are radicals on the right, there are radicals on the left, and then there's everybody in between. This guy is off the chart on the right. He was a crazed person in the House of Representatives on policy. His own Tea Party folks thought he was beyond the pale. And he's just, I mean, there is no wall far enough on the right to stop him. Now he runs the budget for the government of the United States, and I've got to tell you, it is not going to happen. Interestingly, some of the things you learn in background, one of the cabinet secretaries, not to mention a name, said in public, they cannot cut Meals on Wheels. My mother depends on that. Now, just forget the fact that he's a multi-billionaire, but that's okay. Nonetheless, it's a pretty good description of the way in which Meals on Wheels serves so very many people. It's not going to happen. We're still going to have a huge fight over the budget, and the wall issue is not finished. That's going to go on. That fight's going to go on.